The morning sun cast golden rays over Jacob Miller's peaceful ranch, a vast stretch of land just outside the city limits. His property had been in the family for generations, free from the constraints of urban life and, more importantly, the tyranny of an HOA. His father, Judge Richard Miller, had bought the land years ago, wanting a place where rules made sense, where a man could live without a committee telling him what color his mailbox should be. Jacob had always appreciated the freedom of his land. The large front porch where he sipped coffee every morning, the barn where his younger cousins loved to play when they visited, and of course, the long gravel driveway leading up to his home, untouched by the rigid demands of suburban conformity. That peaceful existence shattered the day the new HOA president, Margaret Hastings, self-proclaimed queen of the neighborhood, came knocking. She arrived in a pressed blazer and oversized sunglasses, her lips pursed like she had just swallowed a lemon. Jacob had heard about her before, a woman infamous for imposing ridiculous rules and wielding power like a medieval tyrant. "You need to remove that old barn," she said, barely looking at him. "It's an eyesore." Jacob frowned, arms crossed. "That barn's been here longer than you've been alive, Margaret, and this land isn't under HOA jurisdiction." Margaret sniffed, unimpressed. "All properties within half a mile of the community fall under our aesthetic guidelines, and that includes yours." Jacob chuckled dryly. "That's not how property law works." Her fake smile tightened. "We'll see about that." She turned sharply on her heel, leaving a strong scent of overpriced perfume in her wake. Jacob thought that would be the end of it. Just another overreaching HOA president trying to control what wasn't hers. But he underestimated Margaret Hastings. 2 days later, he received a letter in the mail. It wasn't about the barn, it was worse. The HOA had officially banned his family from visiting his property. Jacob read the letter twice, thinking it had to be some kind of joke. But there it was, written in the HOA's pompous legal jargon. Due to increased traffic and concerns for the community's safety, all non-resident visitors to properties within the HOA's jurisdiction must be pre-approved. As your land falls within our extended boundary considerations, your frequent visitors pose a disruption. Effective immediately, unauthorized guests, including family members, are prohibited from entry. Jacob crumpled the paper in his fists. This wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a personal attack. His family, especially his younger cousins and elderly father, visited often. His father, Judge Richard Miller, had built this ranch as a haven for their family. And now, some overzealous control freak thought she could decide who was allowed on his land. Fuming, Jacob stormed into the HOA office the next morning. It was a small but sterile building in the center of the neighborhood, with neatly trimmed hedges and an artificial-looking welcome mat that read asterisk, "In compliance we trust." Inside, Margaret Hastings sat behind a pristine desk, her hands folded neatly over a stack of papers. Jacob didn't bother with pleasantries. "What the hell is this letter?" He slapped the paper down on her desk. Margaret looked up with a serene expression, as if she had been expecting him. "Ah, Mr. Miller, I assumed you'd be by. The policy is quite clear. Excessive visitors cause disturbances. We must protect the community's peace." Jacob scoffed. "Protect it from what? My 80-year-old father who comes over for Sunday dinner, my little cousins who play in my asterisk backyard." Margaret tilted her head, her expression saccharine. "Rules are rules, Mr. Miller. We can't make exceptions." Jacob leaned forward, his voice low and firm. "You don't have jurisdiction over my land." Margaret gave a smug little smile. "Our influence extends beyond technicalities. The community agrees with me. If your guests continue to visit, we will impose fines and take legal action." Jacob felt a slow, burning rage settle in his chest. Margaret had no real power over him, but she was banking on the fact that he wouldn't want the hassle of fighting back. She had no idea who she was messing with. Jacob straightened, forcing a cold smile. "All right then," he said, "if that's the game you want to play." He turned and walked out, already reaching for his phone. His father needed to hear about this. Because if there was one person who knew exactly how to deal with overreaching authority, it was Judge Richard Miller. Jacob sat on his porch, his phone pressed to his ear as he relayed the entire situation to his father. There was a long silence on the other end before Judge Richard Miller finally spoke. "They did what?" His voice was calm, but Jacob could hear the unmistakable edge of irritation beneath it. "They banned you and the rest of the family from visiting my own property," Jacob repeated. "Margaret Hastings is running the HOA like her own personal kingdom." Another pause, then a quiet chuckle. "Well, son, she's just made a very costly mistake." Jacob leaned back in his chair, the tension in his chest easing slightly. "So, you'll help?" His father scoffed. "Oh, I'll do more than help. I'll handle it." Jacob grinned, knowing full well that when Judge Miller said he would handle something, it meant things were about to go very, very badly for the other party. Over the next few days, the HOA doubled down on their absurd ruling. Margaret sent another letter, this time threatening to tow any unauthorized vehicles from Jacob's driveway. She also filed a formal complaint with the county about unregulated gatherings, claiming Jacob was hosting disruptive events, when all he had done was invite his father over for coffee. Then came the final straw. Jacob watched from his porch as a tow truck rumbled down his driveway, stopping just in front of his father's car. A wiry man in a reflective vest hopped out, clipboard in hand, ready to hook up the vehicle. Jacob was down the steps in seconds. "Touch that car and you won't like what happens next." The tow truck driver hesitated. "Sorry, buddy. HOA sent the order, said non-resident vehicles aren't allowed." Jacob clenched his fists. "This is my land. The HOA has *0 authority here." Before the situation could escalate, another vehicle approached, Judge Richard Miller's black SUV. The moment the driver stepped out, the tow truck driver paled, because Richard Miller wasn't just Jacob's father. He was the county judge, the same judge who had final authority over HOA regulations. Judge Miller adjusted his suit cuffs and eyed the tow truck driver coldly. "Son, do you have a legal order to tow this vehicle?" The man fumbled with his clipboard. The HOA sent." "That wasn't my question." Judge Miller's voice was like steel. "Do you have a legal order?" The driver swallowed hard, then shook his head. "Good, then turn that truck around before you find yourself cited for trespassing." The driver wasted no time climbing back into his truck, revering down the driveway like his life depended on it. Jacob turned to his father, a smirk tugging at his lips. "I assume you have a plan." Judge Miller gave a slow, knowing smile. "Oh, I do, and Margaret Hastings is about to learn the hard way that she's not the law around here." Jacob leaned against the porch railing, watching his father with growing anticipation. "All right, Dad," he said, "tell me what you've got in mind." Judge Miller adjusted his tie, his expression calm but laced with something Jacob recognized, righteous fury. "Margaret Hastings wants to play power games? Fine, but she forgot one important detail." Jacob raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" His father's lips curled into a smirk. "She's still within my jurisdiction." Jacob chuckled. "So what's the plan? Sue them? Shut the HOA down?" Judge Miller shook his head. "Not yet. First, I want to see just how far she's willing to push her fake authority. Then we'll remind her what real authority looks like." Jacob liked the sound of that. That evening, he invited his entire family over for dinner, just to see how the HOA would react. His cousins played in the yard, his aunt and uncle parked their cars in the driveway, and Judge Miller sat at the head of the dinner table like a king awaiting his next move. Right on cue, Margaret Hastings showed up. She arrived in a pristine white SUV, stepping out like she was the sheriff of a lawless town. The moment she saw the parked cars, the laughter of children, and Judge Miller himself, her lips tightened. Jacob greeted her with a smile. "Margaret, here to join us for dinner." Her nostrils flared. "You're violating the HOA's mandate, Jacob. You were warned about unauthorized guests." Judge Miller cleared his throat, standing up from his chair. That's interesting, Mrs. Hastings, because I just reviewed the county property records this morning, and Jacob's land is not asterisk under HOA jurisdiction. Margaret blinked, clearly caught off guard, but she recovered quickly. The HOA has an extended influence zone for community peace. That includes properties near asterisk the neighborhood. Judge Miller nodded slowly, as if considering her words. I see. And where exactly is this extended influence zone written into county law? Margaret hesitated. Judge Miller's voice turned sharp. It's not, is it? Margaret straightened her shoulders. It's an asterisk, understood. No, it's not, Judge Miller interrupted, his voice dropping to a tone that had made courtroom defendants tremble. You've been overstepping your authority. And worse, you've been asterisk illegally restricting access to private property that is not within HOA control. Margaret's face turned red. We're only trying to maintain order in the community. Judge Miller smiled coldly. Then you won't mind if I maintain some asterisk order asterisk of my own. Margaret's mouth opened, but she clearly wasn't sure what to say. Jacob folded his arms, suppressing his grin. What happens next? His father glanced at Margaret. Oh, we're just getting started. The next morning, Judge Miller was up early, already making calls from Jacob's kitchen while sipping his black coffee. Jacob sat across from him, intrigued. So what exactly are you setting up? Jacob asked. His father smirked. A reckoning. Over the next few days, the plan unfolded perfectly. First, Judge Miller reached out to the county zoning board. A thorough review of property boundaries confirmed what he already knew. Jacob's land was not within the HOA's jurisdiction. That alone was enough to invalidate every ridiculous rule Margaret had tried to enforce. But Judge Miller wasn't stopping there. Next, he made a few calls to local law enforcement, ensuring that any future HOA attempts to trespass or tow vehicles from Jacob's land would be met with immediate legal consequences. Then came the real masterstroke, an official county-level investigation into the HOA itself. It turned out Margaret had been enforcing regulations that didn't legally exist, collecting fines she had no right to impose, and even altering community bylaws without proper voting procedures. But Judge Miller wasn't done yet. The final touch was a special legal motion he filed directly with the county commission, one that could permanently restrict the HOA's power not just over Jacob, but over the asterisk entire neighborhood. And then, as if on cue, Margaret Hastings walked right into the trap. That evening, she showed up again, marching up Jacob's driveway with a clipboard in hand, flanked by 2 other HOA board members. She didn't even wait for Jacob to greet her before launching into another speech. You're still in violation of HOA regulations, she snapped. Your father and these visitors need to leave immediately or we'll begin issuing fines. Jacob just smiled. You sure about that? Margaret's eyes narrowed. Excuse me. Judge Miller stepped forward, holding up a thick folder of legal documents. Margaret, I'd like to introduce you to a little thing called asterisk the law asterisk. Margaret's expression flickered with uncertainty, but she quickly regained her composure. The HOA has full authority over community regulations. Judge Miller sighed. No, it doesn't. And as of this morning, the county has officially launched an investigation into the entire HOA's activities. He paused for effect, including your illegal enforcement of non-existent rules. Margaret paled. That's ridiculous, you can't just... Oh, I can, Judge Miller smiled, and I have. Jacob watched in satisfaction as Margaret's confidence crumbled. The other HOA board members exchanged nervous glances, realizing they had backed the wrong horse. Margaret tried one last time to regain control. We'll fight this. Judge Miller's smile widened. You are fighting this, and you're losing. Jacob chuckled, watching as Margaret's face turned red with fury. You're welcome to stay for dinner, Margaret, he said cheerfully. Looks like you're going to need some comfort food. Margaret let out a frustrated huff, turned on her heel, and stormed back to her car. But Jacob knew this was just the beginning of her downfall. The fallout began almost immediately. The very next morning, HOA members flooded Margaret Hastings' inbox with panicked emails. The county's investigation had been announced publicly, and homeowners were furious. Many had received unjust fines for things as petty as incorrect garden decorations or parking too close to the curb. Now, with Judge Miller's legal hammer hanging over the HOA's head, the entire neighborhood was turning against Margaret. But that wasn't the worst of it. Jacob was sitting on his porch when he saw the sheriff's car pull up in front of Margaret's house. He leaned forward, watching as two uniformed officers stepped out. Minutes later, Margaret herself appeared at the door, her usual smug expression replaced with one of barely concealed panic. Jacob smirked. "Oh, this is gonna be good." His father joined him, arms crossed, a satisfied look on his face. "They're serving her the official notice. She's being summoned for a formal hearing with the county commission." Jacob whistled. "She must be livid." Judge Miller chuckled. "Oh, I'm sure she is, but it gets better." A few minutes later, the officers got back into their car, leaving Margaret standing in her doorway, gripping the papers so tightly her knuckles turned white. Then, as if the universe wanted to personally humiliate her, one of her own HOA board members, a middle-aged man named Greg, marched up her driveway. "Margaret, what the hell is this?" Greg shouted, waving his own set of legal papers. "We're all being investigated because of *U." Jacob could hear Margaret's shrill response from all the way down the street. "I was protecting the integrity of the neighborhood." Greg wasn't buying it. "No, you were running a scam, and now we're all in deep trouble because of your fake rules." Margaret sputtered, clearly losing control of the situation. Meanwhile, Jacob turned to his father. "So, about that last part of your plan, when does that kick in?" Judge Miller grinned. "Oh, right about now. Almost as if on cue, another county official's car pulled up. This time, it was someone from the zoning board. The moment the official stepped out, clipboard in hand, Margaret's expression twisted in horror. "You see," Judge Miller said, watching with amusement, "once the county got involved, they started reviewing every single one of Margaret's policies. Turns out, not only was she overstepping her authority, she was collecting unauthorized HOA dues and spending them on things the neighborhood never approved." Jacob raised an eyebrow. "You mean?" His father smirked. "Margaret Hastings is about to face an official audit, and if there's even a sent unaccounted for, she'll be looking at criminal charges." Jacob let out a low whistle. "Damn, you really did handle it." They watched as Margaret, now completely frazzled, tried to argue with the zoning official. But the writing was on the wall. Her reign of terror was crumbling in real time. "Pass the coffee," Judge Miller said, settling back in his chair. "I could watch this all day." Margaret Hastings was unraveling, and it was glorious to watch. By midday, news had spread throughout the neighborhood. Homeowners were furious, demanding explanations, refunds, and in some cases, outright calling for Margaret's removal from the HOA board. Greg, the once loyal HOA board member, had turned completely against her, going door to door exposing how she had been pocketing money from bogus fines. And then the final blow landed. A countywide order had just been issued. Effective immediately, Margaret Hastings and her entire HOA board were banned from enforcing any regulations until the investigation was complete. But the cherry on top. Judge Miller had successfully filed a motion to have Margaret personally banned from holding any official HOA position in the county. That meant she wasn't just losing control of Jacob's land, she was losing everything. Margaret stormed into the county office that afternoon, demanding to speak to whoever was in charge. The clerk barely batted an eye as she handed over the official notice. "You've been temporarily removed from HOA operations," the clerk said flatly. "Pending further review, your authority is revoked, and no community fines, warnings, or complaints issued under your leadership will be considered valid." Margaret's face turned purple. This is asterisk insane asterisk. You can't just... The clerk held up a hand. If you have a complaint, take it up with the county judge. Margaret opened her mouth, then froze, because she asterisk knew exactly who the county judge was. Richard Miller. She staggered back a step. No, no, this isn't fair. But it was fair, and poetic, too. Back at the ranch, Jacob watched from his phone as videos of Margaret's public meltdown in the county office spread through the neighborhood's group chats. One particular clip showed her stomping her foot like a child, screaming about how the HOA was supposed to have asterisk unquestioned authority. Jacob laughed. Well, I guess she questioned the wrong person. His father smirked, sipping his coffee. Justice is a beautiful thing, isn't it? Later that evening, Greg and a few other former HOA members showed up at Jacob's place. We just wanted to say, Greg hesitated before exhaling sharply. We're sorry, man. We should have stopped her sooner. She had us all convinced that she knew what she was doing. Jacob shrugged. Better late than never. What happens to the HOA now? Greg sighed. We're dissolving it. No one wants to deal with this mess anymore. And Margaret, she's selling her house and moving. Jacob grinned. Guess she finally realized she's not the law. Greg chuckled. Yeah, and thanks to your dad, she never will be again. Jacob glanced over at his father, who simply raised his coffee mug in a silent toast. Margaret Hastings had spent years making life miserable for everyone else. But now she was the one packing up, defeated and humiliated. And Jacob. Jacob had one asterisk. A week later, peace had finally returned to Jacob's land. No more surprise visits from Margaret. No more nonsense HOA letters. No more ridiculous fines. Just the quiet, open space he had always loved. The HOA was officially disbanded. After Margaret's disgrace, no one wanted to take over leadership, and with the county's investigation looming, the remaining board members resigned one by one. By the time the final paperwork was signed, the neighborhood had unanimously voted to remove the HOA asterisk permanently asterisk. Margaret, meanwhile, had disappeared from public view. Word around town was that she had put her house up for sale at a steep discount, desperate to leave before the county's audit turned up anything more damning. Nobody rushed to buy it. No one wanted to live in the house of a woman who had tried to rule over them like a dictator. Jacob leaned back on his porch chair, sipping his coffee. His father sat next to him, flipping through the newspaper with a smirk. Did you see this? Judge Miller asked, holding up an article from the local paper. The headline read, Former HOA President Arias IGNS amid investigation. HOA DISSOLVD. Jacob chuckled. That's gotta sting. His father shrugged. Actions have consequences. She tried to control what wasn't hers, and now she's lost everything. Just then, Jacob's cousins ran across the yard, laughing and playing tag near the barn. His aunt and uncle sat nearby, enjoying the peaceful evening. It was the way things were always supposed to be, without Margaret's ridiculous rules trying to get in the way. Greg, the former HOA board member, pulled up in his truck and stepped out with a grin. I brought something for you, he said, holding up a freshly printed sign. Jacob took it, reading the words aloud with a grin. Private property, no HOA jurisdiction, ever. Laughing, Jacob nailed it onto the front gate. Greg clapped him on the shoulder. Feels good, doesn't it? Jacob grinned, better than good. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Jacob took a deep breath. His land was his again. His family was welcome any time they pleased. And Margaret Hastings. She was nothing more than a bad memory. Judge Miller raised his coffee mug once more in a silent toast. To freedom. Jacob clinked his mug against his father's. To never letting an HOA within 100 miles of this place again. They both laughed, watching as the stars began to twinkle overhead. The fight was over, justice had been served, and Jacob's home. It was finally, truly his again.